If you handle this fruit for just a few hours, your fingerprints will completely disappear. And in 1978, the CIA actually classified documents about it. But here's what they didn't want you to know. The papaya sitting in your kitchen right now contains an enzyme so powerful it can dissolve human tissue. And that's just the beginning of this story. I'll tell you exactly what those CIA documents revealed in just a moment, but first, you need to understand something disturbing. For centuries, people have been dying because of this fruit. And most of them never saw it coming. Now, before you think this is just about some chemical reaction, let me stop you right there. Because what happened in colonial Brazil wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. But here's where it gets twisted. So, about those fingerprints. The enzyme is called papain. Papin. And it doesn't just erase your fingerprints temporarily. If you're exposed to it long enough, we're talking papaya plantation workers, people processing the fruit for hours every day. The ridges on your fingertips are literally digested away. But here's what the industry didn't tell those workers in Hawaii during the 1950s. They knew. The companies absolutely knew what was happening. And what they did about it, well, I'll get to that dark chapter soon. Hold on, because this gets even stranger. In 2003, a group of thieves in Singapore actually weaponized this property. They would soak their hands in papaya extract before committing robberies. The full story of how they got caught involves something you'd never expect, and I'll reveal that twist later. But first, we need to go back. Way back. Most people think papaya comes from Hawaii or maybe Thailand. They're wrong. The papaya's origin story is actually wrapped up in one of history's most violent colonial campaigns. And the indigenous people who first cultivated it? They tried to warn everyone. The Mayans called it the tree of life, but that's a mistranslation. The original term was closer to tree of transformation. And they had strict rules about who could handle it and when. Break those rules, and the consequences were severe. I'll explain what happened to those who violated the taboo in just a bit. But here's what the Spanish conquistadors did when they first encountered papaya in the early 1500s. When Hernán Cortés's men arrived in Mexico in 1519, they were suffering from infected wounds. The Aztecs showed them how to apply papaya pulp to the injuries. Within days, the dead tissue was gone. The wounds were clean. The Spanish were amazed. By 1521, Spanish forces were using papaya deliberately. Not as medicine. As a weapon. They discovered that if you concentrate the latex from unripe papaya and expose prisoners to it, you can cause excruciating chemical burns. And because it's a fruit, there was no evidence of torture. Documents from the Spanish Inquisition in New Spain, that's Mexico, reference a natural correction method involving tropical fruit. For 300 years, historians thought they meant pineapple. They were wrong. Fast forward to the 1800s. Papaya is now being cultivated on massive plantations across the Caribbean and Central America. And the workers, mostly enslaved Africans and later indentured servants, are handling unripe papayas for 12-14 hours a day. Their fingerprints disappear within weeks. Their hands develop permanent damage. Some lose the ability to feel anything with their fingertips. But here's what makes this truly sinister. By the 1880s, plantation owners knew exactly what was happening. There are ledgers, actual accounting books, where they calculated the acceptable loss of workers' hand function. And what they did to keep production going anyway. That's coming up. Now, here's something they definitely don't teach in schools. Christopher Columbus mentioned papaya in his journals from his 1493 voyage. But one entry was mysteriously crossed out. For centuries, historians assumed it was illegible. In 2007, using UV imaging, researchers at Yale revealed what Columbus actually wrote. And it explains why the Spanish crown tried to control papaya distribution for the next 200 years. But before I tell you what that entry said, we need to talk about what papaya was actually being used for in royal courts. Because it wasn't food. It was being used for something that would be completely illegal today. Unripe papaya contains such high concentrations of papain that it can trigger uterine contractions. In the 16th and 17th centuries, it was secretly used by royal physicians to terminate unwanted pregnancies, particularly when political marriages produced inconvenient results. Catherine de' Medici, Queen of France, allegedly kept a private supply shipped from Spanish territories. There are at least 3 suspicious miscarriages in the French royal family between 1550 and 1560 that historians now believe were induced with papaya. But here's the twist that connects to our earlier loop about the CIA. Those 1978 CIA documents I mentioned? They weren't about fingerprints or thieves. They were about birth control. During the Cold War, the CIA was researching natural abortifacients that could be deployed in target populations. Papaya was on the list. The program was called Operation Garden Plot. No, wait, that's different. This one didn't have a public code name. And what they discovered about papaya's effects led to immediate classification. I'll tell you why that matters in our modern world soon, but first, let's go back to those plantations. Because what was happening there makes modern labor controversies look tame by comparison. Hawaii, 1950s. Post-war boom. Papaya is becoming a cash crop. The Dole Food Company and Del Monte are competing for dominance. And they need workers. They recruit heavily from the Philippines, promising good wages. What they don't mention is the health disclosure buried in contracts written in English that most workers can't read. By 1957, over 2,000 workers in Hawaiian papaya processing plants report complete loss of fingerprints. Another 600 report severe respiratory problems from inhaling papayan dust. The company's response? They commissioned a study. But here's the thing, they hired the researchers, controlled the data, and the conclusion was essentially, papayan exposure is generally safe with proper precautions. The proper precautions they recommended? Gloves that cost more than a day's wages. The workers couldn't afford them. The companies knew this. Production continued. And when workers tried to organize for better conditions in 1959, something convenient happened. The ringleaders were all fired for unrelated performance issues. But wait, there's more to this story. Because at the same time papaya workers were losing their fingerprints, the medical establishment was discovering something incredible about papayan. In the 1960s, pharmaceutical companies realized papayan could be used to create meat tenderizers, yes, but also medical-grade wound debriding agents, dead tissue removal, burns treatment, surgical applications. The market value? Millions. Then tens of millions. Today? The global papayan market is worth over $100 million annually. And guess where most of that papayan comes from? The same plantations where workers still handle raw papaya without adequate protection. But here's the part that'll make you angry. The workers processing papaya to extract papayan in places like India, Sri Lanka, and East Africa earn approximately $2 to $5 per day. The pharmaceutical-grade papayan they produce sells for $30 to $50 per kilogram. A single worker can process 50 kilograms a day. Do the math. Someone's making serious money. And it's not the people losing their fingerprints. Now, remember that Singapore heist I mentioned earlier? Here's how they got caught. The thieves used papaya to erase their fingerprints before a jewelry store robbery. Perfect crime, right? Except one of them got a cut during the burglary. They left blood at the scene. DNA testing caught them. The papaya trick worked, their fingerprints were gone. But they forgot about DNA. The investigating officer later said it was the most bizarre case of his career. The criminals had essentially dissolved their own identity, partially. Which brings us to a philosophical question that's actually being debated in bioethics circles right now. If your fingerprints can be chemically erased, what does that mean for identity? For security? For the future of biometric systems? I'll get to the terrifying implications in a moment, but first, we need to talk about what happened in Brazil in 1889. Brazil, 1889. A mysterious illness sweeps through papaya plantations in the northern states. Workers develop severe skin lesions, respiratory failure, and in at least 70 documented cases, death. The official explanation? Tropical fever. The real cause? It took over 100 years to figure out. In 1998, a Brazilian medical historian named Dr. Maria Santos was researching occupational diseases. She found autopsy reports from 1889 that had been misfiled in church records. The cause of death in these workers? Anaphylactic shock from prolonged papayan exposure. Turns out, if you're exposed to latex from papaya trees day after day, you can develop severe allergic reactions. The immune system goes haywire. And once it starts, even being near papaya can trigger a fatal reaction. But here's what makes this a cover-up rather than just a tragedy. The plantation owners knew workers were dying. They attributed it to weak constitutions and kept hiring replacements. When local doctors started making the connection to papaya latex, they were paid to stay quiet. One doctor who refused and published his findings? His medical license was revoked, and he died under suspicious circumstances in 1891. His name was Dr. Antonio Silva. Remember that name. Alright, remember that censored Columbus Journal entry from 1493? Here's what it said. The natives showed us a tree bearing fruit they call papaya. They warned our men not to harvest the unripe ones with bare hands. Those who ignored this advice developed terrible sores. One man, who consumed much of the white sap, lost the use of his hands entirely. The natives say this tree is protected by spirits who punish the greedy. Now, here's where this connects to something we haven't discussed yet. The indigenous peoples of Central and South America believed papaya had spiritual properties. But these weren't just superstitions. They were safety protocols disguised as religion. The Mayans and Aztecs understood something that modern occupational safety standards took until the 1970s to acknowledge: repeated exposure to papayan is dangerous. So they created elaborate rituals around papaya harvesting. Only certain people could harvest. Only during specific moon phases. Only wearing certain protective plant resins on their hands. Only taking what was needed. Break the rules, and the spirits would curse you. Except the curse was just chemical burns and allergic reactions. The rituals were chemistry disguised as mysticism. The Spanish destroyed this knowledge system. They saw primitive superstition where there was actually sophisticated medical understanding. And thousands died as a result because Europeans didn't have the cultural context to understand the warnings. But some of that knowledge survived in hidden form. In remote parts of Mexico and Guatemala, indigenous communities still practice modified versions of these papaya rituals. And in 2015, an ethnobotanist named Dr. James Rodriguez discovered something fascinating. These communities were using a specific combination of local plants, crushed and mixed, to coat their hands before harvesting papaya. He analyzed the mixture. It contained natural protease inhibitors, compounds that neutralize papayan on contact. They had invented latex-free gloves, using plants, hundreds of years before modern chemistry. So here's the uncomfortable question. If indigenous people figured out safe papaya handling centuries ago, why are workers in 2025 still losing their fingerprints? The answer is profit. Always profit. Let's talk about the rainbow papaya. In the 1990s, papaya farms in Hawaii were being devastated by a virus called PRSV, papaya ring spot virus. Entire crops were dying. The industry was collapsing. Enter Monsanto and the University of Hawaii. They developed a genetically modified papaya resistant to the virus. It saved the Hawaiian papaya industry. Success story, right? But here's what they don't tell you in the press releases. The rainbow papaya contains genes from the virus itself. It's transgenic. And while the FDA approved it as safe to eat, there's a catch. The papayan concentration in GMO papayas is actually 15 to 20% higher than in traditional varieties. Which means workers handling these fruits are getting exposed to even more of the enzyme that destroys their fingerprints. Was this intentional? No evidence suggests that. But did anyone warn the workers? Also no. Remember those Mayan taboo violations I mentioned? Here's what actually happened. If someone harvested papaya improperly and developed severe reactions, they were isolated from the community. Not as punishment, but as quarantine. The Maya understood that someone having an allergic reaction could trigger reactions in others through cross-contamination. The curse was just epidemic prevention. You'd think modern regulations would protect workers better than ancient Mayan protocols. You'd be wrong. In the United States, OSHA has guidelines for papain exposure in pharmaceutical settings. But agricultural workers? There are no specific protections. Papaya processing is classified as general agricultural work. The enzyme that can erase your fingerprints? Not considered a significant hazard. In 2019, I spoke with a former papaya plantation worker from Thailand. She showed me her hands. Completely smooth fingertips. No ridges at all. She'd worked in processing for 8 years. She can't unlock her smartphone with her fingerprint. Can't use biometric security at banks. She told me, I gave my identity to Papaya. And all I got was $5 a day. Now we're getting to the part where everything connects. Earlier I mentioned the Spanish Inquisition using papaya as a torture method. Here are the specific details that were documented but classified for centuries. They would extract concentrated papain and apply it to sensitive areas of prisoners' bodies. The enzyme would begin breaking down skin proteins immediately. Within hours, it would reach nerve endings. The pain was described as fire from within. And because it's organic degradation, not burning or cutting, it left minimal evidence. After the session, they'd wash the area with neutralizing agents. The damage would heal over weeks, often without scarring. This technique was used in the Caribbean colonies until at least 1790. Then it disappears from records. Officially discontinued. But here's the thing. Those CIA documents from 1978? They weren't just about birth control. They were exploring papain as a potential biochemical agent. Not as a weapon exactly, but as a compliance tool. The research showed that controlled exposure could cause enough discomfort to make subjects cooperative without leaving lasting damage. But the program was shut down. Official reason? Ethical concerns and limited practical application. Translation: someone realized that dosing people with fruit enzymes might be hard to justify in congressional hearings. Here's where we get to that future security concern. Biometric systems, fingerprints, facial recognition, retinal scans, are everywhere now. Your phone, your bank, airports, government buildings. But if fingerprints can be chemically erased with something as common as papaya, how secure are these systems really? Security researchers have been warning about this since 2010. You can erase your fingerprints temporarily with papaya for under $20. It lasts weeks. Long enough to bypass biometric security. And here's the terrifying part. There's no reliable way to detect if someone's fingerprints have been chemically removed versus just not being readable due to scarring, age, or moisture. In 2021, an underground market emerged in Southeast Asia offering fingerprint erasure services using concentrated papain. For $500 to $1,000, criminal networks would treat your fingertips to remove prints for 4 to 8 weeks. Law enforcement shut down the major operations within a year. But the technique is out there now. It's not secret anymore. Let's talk about what papaya cultivation is doing to the environment. Because the fingerprint thing? That's just human cost. The ecological cost is mounting. Papaya plantations in Brazil are expanding into former Amazon rainforest. They require massive amounts of pesticides because the trees are vulnerable to everything: fungi, viruses, insects. The GMO varieties reduced one problem but created another. Rainbow papayas need fewer antivirals but more insecticides. The chemical runoff is contaminating waterways. Remember those indigenous communities preserving ancient papaya knowledge? Their forests are being cleared for commercial plantations. The plants they used to create natural papain inhibitors? Going extinct. We're destroying the solution while perpetuating the problem. It's perfectly human, and perfectly stupid. Remember Dr. Antonio Silva, the Brazilian doctor who tried to expose papaya deaths in 1889? In 2003, the Brazilian Medical Association officially acknowledged his findings. They issued a posthumous award for occupational health research. 114 years too late. But at least someone remembered. So where does this leave us? Papaya isn't going anywhere. It's too valuable, too established. Global production exceeds 13 million tons annually. The industry is worth billions. But here's what should change: worker protections, mandatory safety equipment, exposure limits, compensation for occupational injuries. These aren't radical ideas. They're basic human rights. And those fingerprints? Here's the final twist. The damage from papain exposure isn't actually permanent in most cases. If you stop exposure and wait 6 to 12 months, your fingerprints will regenerate. But plantation workers don't get 6 to 12 months off. They can't afford to. So the damage becomes cumulative, chronic, eventually permanent. The fruit doesn't erase fingerprints. The system does. This isn't really a story about papaya. It's about how we treat the people who feed us. About how profit consistently wins over protection. About how indigenous knowledge gets dismissed until Western science rediscovers it decades later. It's about how something as innocent as a fruit can become part of exploitation, weaponization, and corporate negligence. The next time you eat papaya, think about this: someone harvested it. Someone processed it. Someone sacrificed their fingerprints so you could enjoy a tropical fruit in your smoothie. I'm not saying don't eat papaya. I'm saying know the cost. Demand better. Support companies that actually protect their workers. The papaya in your grocery store is a miracle of global agriculture. It's also a testament to ongoing exploitation. Both things can be true. History isn't clean. Food isn't innocent. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing about a fruit isn't what it does to your body, it's what the industry built around it does to your fellow humans. If this video changed how you see something as simple as a papaya, hit that like button. Subscribe for more dark histories of everyday fruits. And drop a comment: what other innocent foods have disturbing stories behind them? Because trust me, papaya isn't the only one.